Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin, and in today's video, I'm going to do a fabric pull for my next linen quilt. And, well, you know the rest. Stay with me. So this fabric pull sits at the convergence of like 3 obsessions right now. The first is I'm making linen quilts, which if you have not seen the previous videos, you can go back and watch them, and I talk about linen a lot. Well, I talk about everything a lot. But anyway, so I'm working through my linen stash that I have collected from linen shirts at the thrift store. And I made the first one as just a baby size, really kind of to see if I liked it. And I liked it so much that I had the thought, I could make another one of these, but maybe just in a different color. So there's all the whole linen quilt. And that linen quilt battle, in that original video, I talk about these different patterns that I'm considering. And the one that I did kind of almost like a test run was the comfort quilt from Sharon Holland Designs. In my head, I was moving on to the dialogue cabin pattern, which is in cool colors. At least the designer's quilt is kind of in a cool color palette. And so the MMA, the mixed martial arts debate between the two patterns, with no blood or swearing, is, do I make a quilt that I've already made that I know I like and is really, really pretty and very fun and very easy? Or do I make a different pattern for the sake of making something different? Because I have not been quilting a long time, so I've been a little reluctant to repeat a quilt pattern until I've done a bunch. The thing about the dialogue cabin pattern, and we'll get to that a little bit more, is it's a gradient in 4 different hues is the way she has it designed. So obviously I'm trying to work with the linen that I have, and I typically don't go by yardage, but in this case I definitely don't because I'm using linen. So back and forth on those. But knowing that I'm really wanting to go toward the cool color palette. And then, so that's the first obsession, is the whole linen quilts and which pattern to do next. Then, kind of in an unrelated fashion, I've gotten low-key obsessed with this concept of quilt in a day. Not because I want to make a quilt in a day, but because there seems to be so much interest in making a quilt in a day, which I have largely arrived at the conclusion that that's not possible, but that's for another video. So I've probably watched 20 videos on quilting in a day. So I'm intrigued at the idea of I guess it's like, can you make a whole quilt in a weekend? And if so, how would you do that? And what sort of quilt would you make? And so you may already see where this is going. If I'm going to make a quilt in a weekend, it probably should be a quilt that I have tried before. And it probably should be really fairly simple and lots of fun to make. So yeah, I'm sure by now you really see where I'm going. And then the third thing that has really been on my mind is, what is the perfect size quilt? And obviously the perfect size quilt is different for the person who you're making it for. So if you're making a quilt for a baby, the perfect size quilt is not a king bed size quilt. So this quilt is going to be for me to use around the house. Well, not around, well, I guess it is around the house. So I'm going to call it the nap size quilt. So not a lap size. It really is a throw. Nap size is a throw. So this idea of, I want a quilt that I can lay down on the couch and it go from my chin all the way the length of my body and over my feet. And if I turn over, I don't get that air gap, where you turn over, you're like so snuggly and you turn over to get just a little bit more snuggly and you get that cool breeze and it messes the whole thing up. So it's got to be wide enough to cover my whole body and long enough to cover my whole body, but not so big that I either lose interest in making it or it's an ordeal to get out or it drags the floor or any of those things. So now on to the fabric pull. That was a long explanation, but I have a lot to say. So let me get the fabrics out. I dragged my tote of linen out. I was actually sitting in the floor directly behind me. I do this sometimes, like, what blues do I have? And I sat down on the floor and started pulling shirts. None of them, well, some of them were broken down. Most of them were not broken down. They were just shirts thrown in this tote. So I got my blue linen fabrics out because I wanted to see, what do I even have? Like, what's going to work together? And I knew I had a fair amount of blue family in the cool family. And I wanted to see kind of where I could go with that. So I started with, this is going to be like a shell game. Where did it go? So I started with navy and kind of did all of what I consider the blue family. So I love that sky blue. I found this blue pair of pants actually on the last thrift haul. So if you saw that video, but it was like after we did the shirts, I went down the pants aisle. So got that one. This one was a gift from a friend, which I just love, love, love. And then this was a very interesting thrift store find. And I was like, okay, so those are my blues. And the colorist, that's my youngest daughter, I call her the colorist, happened to be passing through. Sometimes she'll just stop and make a look of disdain. And I knew what it was. It's this right here, the gap. We call it the gap or the jump. There's too big of a jump between this navy and this sky blue. There's something missing here. We need a medium value. So this is a dark value. This is a light value. There's no medium value. And you may be noticing right away that this is very blue and this is not very blue. And then these are also not very blue. I'm going to stop for a second and say, I love color and I love color theory. And I love a nice, tight colorway that really works. When it comes to shirt quilting and scrappy quilting, I am not a throw it all in and it'll come out in a big color wash. For this project, I want a very cohesive, tight, beautiful, everything looks like it belongs with each other. Not matchy-matchy necessarily, but definitely kind of in the same color family. And it gives me joy to consider all of these individual, like, this one's a little gray. This one's a little purple. So I was missing the medium value, had these blues. Immediately, I felt like these two did not go together because while they're both heathered, this one is actually a pretty bright hue. And so the color is very colorful. This one it is obviously blue, but honestly, it is very muted by comparison. So it actually has much more gray in it than this sky blue. These are very close. And these are pretty close. So actually, initially, I threw this out and was working with this. So then I'm like, well, let me pull my turquoises in and see what I've got. So this hits that medium value. Here's the dark. Here's the medium, just for you to see. Here's the light. But it is very saturated. Like this is a person who chose the wrong Instagram filter. It looks like they cranked up the color volume, like, whoa, dial it back. So it's very, very bright, very lovely, but very not cohesive in my opinion, because this is very muted and very heathered, and this is very vibrant and saturated and not very heathered. So I kind of had the And then I found this one, which I love. I don't know that I could adore a turquoise fabric more than I adore this. It's just something about it. So these make more sense together. It's a little more muted, but it is still bright and pretty, and it's heathered. So it kind of goes. And then I pulled out this guy. This would be the next logical step in terms of lightness. So dark, medium, light. But here we are with the saturated again. So that really belongs here. Do you see that? These are like super vibrant and super bright. This one is kind of in this family, but might be able to go over here. So then I, keep digging. I have a lot of light. And I go here. So we're going more green. And these two make sense together. And again, if I was doing the huge color wash, I could probably use all of these, but that's not what I'm going for. So I got to this point, had not pulled out the green, and I was like, well, what if I ended here and I went like from a gradient standpoint, like through the blues and into purple. And so I tried that. And I was kind of like, oh, that could that sounded like a minion from Despicable Me. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe. And I had this guy, which is definitely starting to lean purple. And Paul happened to be walking through from the kitchen to the den, and I was sitting in the middle of this floor, and he goes, oh, no. Like, oh, no. So, when someone has that much of a reaction, you're like, okay, well, maybe I won't. Like, I start immediately putting the purple back. And in all fairness, both to him and to this colorway, this is starting to get warm. And actually, this purple is not really purple. It is blue and red together. And so up close, now, this is the hard thing about quilts, because you want it to look gorgeous up close, but you also want it to look gorgeous from a distance. So from a distance, it reads purple, but from up close, it actually has a very orangey red in it. And he was like, ooh. So I put those back and decided maybe we'll save the purple for another time. And so I had this and I was like, well, that's medium. Oh, no, that's kind of purple. That's not really the direction I want to go. So I thought, well, let's go the other direction. So in our color wheel, I was going this way and I decided to, do a U-turn and come back, going down the interstate 90 miles an hour. Did a U-turn, decided to go toward the green. So I did. And it turns out I have some good greens to choose from, which has not been the case historically here on the Catbird Quilts. I don't know if I don't like green a lot or finding good men's green shirts. Ooh, that's a lot of modifiers. It's tricky, but I haven't had a lot of greens. But somehow I have ended up with some nice green linen shirts. And I went, oh, and this to me is like beautiful. I don't know if you see that. So just, ooh, that is nice. And then I get to right here and I'm like, I don't like it. It's too bright. So then I'm like, oh, okay. That's better. And then I get to right here and I'm like, that's too bright. And so I pulled that out. And now I'm going, okay, so we're starting to get here. So I just stopped at that point. Did not make a commitment. Happened to talk to my friend Joanna, who is a pharmacist and a knitter and a crocheter and a cross stitcher and a quilter. We have a lot in common. And she happened to be going to the thrift store. And so I texted her and was like, hey, so if you happen to find some blue linen shirts, just get them. Like, if you like it, get it. We'll settle up later. So lo and behold, she found some blue linen. And this is what she found. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And actually, one of these shirts had a really fun yoke and cuffs and collar in it. And so I have already picked that apart and used it in one of the Quilty Stars blocks behind me. I hope you can see already, like, ooh, that is nice right there. So now, but then, not sure about this. This gets tricky because I love these fabrics. I love all three of these fabrics. The colorist's opinion was that these were too similar in color, and that if I integrated them in with both of them, that color, actually this whole color, would dominate. And I was already on the fence about this because it was so gray. So I was like, well, what if I pulled these two out and just do this, which kind of pulls that green in? She wrinkled up her nose. And her displeasure was palpable in this space. She's like, I mean, it's okay. So I'm like, just tell me. And she goes, it's the only print. And you have this thing going and it's so pretty and it's the only print, and I don't think it works. I knew she was right immediately, and it just galled me because I wanted to use this shirt so much. I wanted to use really all of these, and she was right. And I thought, well, I think she's right. And so I put them in the cast off pile. So then I felt like that the navy was just too dark because I just don't have any other darks in it. And I thought, well, so I pulled the navy, and then I was like, oh, it's like a, So this was and so I started working with this in my mind as this is the colorway. So if you've seen the Comfort Quilt by Sharon Holland, you know it has two opposing snowball corners. And the one that I did with the pink family, the blushes and pinks and reds and orange, I did a cream colored on one corner and like a grayish tan on the other. I have to stop and say, because I'm considering doing this project over a weekend and trying to get a whole throw size, not a crib quilt, not a baby quilt, not even a lap quilt, like a decent size throw. And P.S., I don't have a long arm machine. I need things to be as simple as possible. So I decided that I think it will be lovely with just one snowball corner, like a little flag, just a little flag but the same one on across the whole quilt. And so it will be a very simple, hopefully very elegant looking, cool, like the ocean, This is when our color wheel comes in handy again. And I thought, oh, this should really be vermilion, which, I love vermilion. And I love saying vermilion. The colors that we have represented here, the complementary color to blue is really orange. So you can see, like if you go across, it's right here in the orange family. And what is complementary to green is red or pink. So if I'm drawing a line across, these are the complementary colors for green, and these are the complementary colors for blue. So to me, the way you match that is you blend these together and you go right across and find what's in the middle, which is vermilion. And so I'm like, ha, 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 I have vermilion linen. And I'm like, ooh, that's pretty, that's pretty. And I actually really love it, but it is so saturated and so bright. And I really had the thought, what your eye will see will be all of this bright orange red, and the comforting, soothing, calming blue palette will be lost to the vermilion. And so I called Paul in. Actually, he might have just been walking through. Again, I was in the floor for a while. And he was like, I think it might be a bit much. And I was already thinking it was a bit much. And so I was like, well, okay. He was like, it's so saturated. I'm like, you're right. So in my head, I hadn't really given up on it, but I put it aside. And so I thought, well, what if I try like a much lighter heathered version? And I actually contend that this would be really pretty still. That really works with all of those. But I've done a lot of pink lately. I've done so much pink and blush. And that's not what I wanted to do. So I ditched that. So then I thought, well, what about kind of a terracotta, apricot, peach, whatever you want to call that. It's a little bit darker than that. And if you remember my floral that I wanted to use so badly, look, it's right there. So it works. It makes sense. And I did the same thing. I was like, I mean, it's pretty, but I just didn't have any, no joie de vivre over it. It just didn't speak to me at all. It was just it was not inspired. And so then I tried orange. You can see where I'm going with this. And the orange, ooh, see, you can tell they're complementary colors. My goodness, is that not gorgeous? Oh, so pretty. Maybe not. It's okay. So I tried every way to make those work and decided, you know what? Then I was like, well, yellow would be nice because blue and yellow is pretty. And I love this. And I just was like, it's just not vibrant enough. It's like I can't be pleased. Sometimes this is the case. I have deep malcontentedness when it comes to color. I really want it to be exactly what I want. And that was just, to me, going to be not interesting enough. The vermilion would be so much that's like, ooh, too interesting. And then this would be not butter, just lovely. So I put that aside and I said out loud, what I really wish is that if I had like a golden, just like almost like a mustard to put into it. So I ditched all those. And then I was like, well, since I'm going for this harmonious, blues, I could do a very calming gray. And I like a lot of these. I may have already said, I like it, but again, I felt like it was not going to be enough contrast. The only one that it would contrast well with would be this darkest one. So the only ones that it would stick out against are these three. And I actually love that. Boy, I could just do a whole quilt. Just side note, I just realized that with just those. But if I took a picture of these fabrics together and did it in grayscale, so took all the color out and I had it up against these would look the same, with maybe the turquoise as an exception. There would not be enough contrast. There's not enough darkness versus lightness. That's why it would work over here, but doesn't work as well over here. So we ditched that. Then I pulled out this, which I actually really, really liked. You know what? This is bugging me. I have to put this back. And thought that might provide enough contrast. And then I opened it up and I literally only have 2 sleeves. And if I'm going to make a throw quilt, I'm going to need 72 of these guys. And that ain't going to cut it. Literally. So that's out. And then I had this and was like, ooh. And again, this is basically all I have of this fabric. So I happen to have a very dark, actually fairly gigantic. It would be called black linen, but it's not black, but my, is it close. And I have the whole shirt. And I got to this far and was like, too far. To just back it up. It's just too dark. It actually would be lovely. But we would have the same situation, I think, with this that we would have with the vermilion, it would just be in contrast rather than hue. So instead of the color being arresting and calling attention to the little flag, the little snowball corners, it would be the contrast. So the value, the volume. So it's dark value. You would look at this glorious wash of blues and you would see black flecks all over the whole thing. So I just went, well, dang, and kind of left it. And I did have the idea, and I'll show you that real quick. I have some Essex linen that a viewer and supporter and friend, I would call John a friend, even though we've never met, sent me. This may not be the one, but he sent me some. It's called black Essex linen. So I have 2 of these. And I really actually was like, I think that might be it. And I'm doing this so you can see it up against all of them. It's dark enough that there's contrast there, maybe with this the exception. And it's heathered and it's muted. Okay, so we're just going to have that as an operating. We're working with that. And then I took the colorist to one of our local thrift stores that we don't often visit that she loves. We perused the men's section and found almost nothing. And then we perused the linens section and I found a white twin sheet, 100% cotton, and a queen flat white all cotton sheet. And I felt like I'd won the lottery. And then I was like, let's just walk through the women's section. Let's just do that. And she goes, okay. And so it's kind of like so where did I go? The thrift store. And what did I find? More linen. So I found a pair of shorts. I can honestly say this is the first time I've ever bought a pair of shorts to use in a quilt. And this is a very unusual linen. I think it might have something else like cotton, a little bit of spandex or something. It's actually woven like a herringbone. But I did double check. It is linen, so we're going to call it. And I liked that a lot. And I felt like it gave it just another layer of interest and a little bit darker. P.S. This shirt is as saturated as the turquoise. It just happens to be in that color palette that works. So it's that kind of periwinkle, French blue, cornflower, kind of all mixed in together. But I found this, and first let's just remark on the embroidery, the satin embroidery. It's Paisley's. I won't tell you what I compared it to. There's a lot of stitching on here. And for one brief and foolish moment, I thought, well, I could pick that out. And I actually tried, and an hour later, I had one paisley all the way out and one mostly out and couldn't get the little bitty stitches under it and said, screw it, I'm not doing it. But I liked this color because it actually bridges, for me, these are kind of in the slightly purple blue family. This one is kind of in the middle, and this one is really, it's like right in between these two. Even though it's darker, it's a little bluer, just a touch. And I actually found this pair of linen pants, which is so close to this. So close. This one is just a hair more purple. This one is just a hair more blue. And so I definitely could have gone that, or I could do this. In the end, I did not include both of these. I just chose this one. And the back of this shirt has no embroidery on it. So I have opted for this, although I had seriously considered just leaving it in for texture. And I think it would be fun and maybe a little bit humorous. But in the end, I was afraid it would read like a print, and then we'd be back to there's no print in this. imagine, if you will, this without the shiny satin paisleys and stitching. And there you go. And then, and you see it already because I've been holding it and not talking about it, is a pair of linen mustard colored linen pants. And I laid it down and I was like, that's the yellow that I want. And I think the reason that I like it is essentially I've taken my color wheel and I've started here and I've carried all the way around here. We skipped the yellow and went to that slightly orange yellow. And what it does is it gives interest because it's not exactly the next color, if that makes sense. One of the things you can do in color theory is you can do complementary, or you can do, this is covered in lint. I don't know why my color wheel is covered. Well, everything actually in our house is covered in lint. You can do analogous, and that's where you just go, everything that connects to each other. So that's apparently what my heart wanted. And that golden yellow marigold to me is just so interesting. And so I had this laid out on the dining room table, and Paul had been out and he walked in and went, ooh. And I knew I had scored. I was like, yes. So now I have my little flags. Now I have my little snowball corners. And then the question arises, since I am going to be doing a whole quilt in a quilt weekend, I have to go in and consider backing and binding. And I'm going to not burden us with backing because we would be here all day. But I did want to talk to you about the binding that I chose, because initially I thought, I'll do blue. And then I felt like it was too much. Like, I don't know. It's like it ruins. I don't know. That was one of those, I can't explain it. I just don't like it. So I pulled my gray back in. I actually really like this, but I have the feeling that any of these grays, minus the light gray, which I feel like doesn't really work, would end up, there's this wash of, oceany blues with some sunny, happy golden yellow, and then this black frame around it. Because, that's what the binding will do. If you're not careful, sometimes your eye goes to the binding, which is what I felt would happen. And then just in a moment of either insanity or genius, I reached back for the floral fabric. And I love this now because it uses, so I'm rolling this up because I want you to see what that would look like small. So this will go around the whole quilt. It'll give it some visual interest, and it ties in the yellow. And lest we forget, the yellow is going to be, just this teeny tiny little corner on all of these. It won't be this big gigantic swath like I have here. But to me, that just kind of tied the whole thing in. And is it exactly the right? No, but it kind of just brings it all together. So it's either going to be genius or madness. I'm not really sure. But I am so pumped about it, and I'm so excited, and I feel like it gives me an opportunity to use this great fabric in a way that will provide such a fun, and I keep saying interesting, compelling. I need a thesaurus about all the words that are like interesting. And so now I have this wash of blues and greens with a little bit of dark to keep it interesting, my mustard yellow pants, snowball corners, and my floral linen that hopefully ties it all in together. And there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed my fabric selection / color selection process. it's a process. I just hope it's been enjoyable for you, maybe helpful, maybe giving you some thoughts. You might be questioning some of my choices. We'll see how they come out in the final quilt, and that should be coming soon. So stay tuned to see if I can make a whole quilt, including binding, in a weekend. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thanks so much for watching.